Hello. Today I'm continuing my look at New Zealand wines, and what I have today is a Syrah from Hawke's Bay. This is Trinity Hill's 2020 Gimblett Gravels Syrah. Trinity Hill, a winery that has quite a reputation for its Syrahs. The winery was founded in 1993 by two London restaurateurs, Robin and Robert Wilson. They were joined a couple of years later by John Hancock, a well-known, actually Australian winemaker who has made his career making wine in New Zealand. And I suppose starting with other varieties, more with Chardonnay and Cabernet Merlot, and also making quite an interesting port-style wine as well. But quickly they found that Syrah actually worked really well. And through a friendship with the Gimblett family in the Rhone, they got hold of cuttings from really good Northern Rhone Syrah vineyards. So one would assume things like La Chapelle and Domaine de Talabert, which are Gimblett's top vineyards. The technical notes on this say that this is 74% from what they call MS clone. So I'm assuming that's Massal Selection, so clones collected from a vineyard where the best vines were picked and cuttings taken. So presumably that is the Gimblett influence there. There are some other clones involved as well, and also actually continuing in a Northern Rhone sort of theme along the lines of the way that Côte Rôtie is made. This has 1% of Viognier included in the blend to well, for aromatics, they say. I note it's not co-fermented, or they don't specify that it's co-fermented, so possibly more for aromatics than necessarily fixing tannins and colour, which would be the justification given for that from a Northern Rhone producer. The current winemaker here, Warren Gibson, is probably rated to be New Zealand's top winemaker with Syrah at the moment. He's responsible for some really good wines, including this is a medium range brand. They also have above this their top Syrah is called Homage, and then they make a wine with just a standard Hawke's Bay designation. So this is from Gimblett Gravel fruit, so there's a specified quality fruit designation there. Not massively expensive. I mean, we're talking at a wine sort of $20 to $25 here per bottle. Still quite young, but nonetheless quite an interesting wine. So the production style continues very much in line with the way that a Rhone wine might be made. There's not a lot of new oak or small oak being used here. This wine ages for between 12 and 16 months in large French oak ovals. They would be seasoned oak, not new. So there's very little direct oak influence. It's more a question of fixing the tannins with slow, gentle oxidation and that sort of thing. The Gimblett Gravels, a region defined by law. There's an association for the Gimblett Gravels. You have to belong to the association and pay dues to be able to use the term, and your vineyard has to be agreed to have the correct soil type, and 95% of the grapes going into the wine have to be from a Gimblett Gravels specified vineyard. So not hugely stringent. I mean, you can plant various varieties there. There aren't specifications like that. But the Gimblett Gravels is a particular area to the west of Hastings, where I believe a couple of hundred years ago the river, as a result of an earthquake, took a bit of a sort of a sidestep, leaving this sort of deep, friable, grey wacky gravel with an alluvial soil over the top. So really friable, low vigour soils. You know, they don't hold too much water, so that you don't get too much vegetation from the vines. So they produce lower yields and thus higher quality. So having said all that, let's have a look at the wine and see what we think of it. First thing to say, lovely depth of darkly pigmented purple red colour. You can see a real sort of purple to the rim. It's not quite blue purple, but there's a quite vivid purple. And when I swirl the wine, it just slightly stains the glass there. So there's a real depth and intensity. They're not huge tears. I suppose there are some forming there. I mean, it's only 13% alcohol, so it's not a massive wine. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that the style of Syrah coming from New Zealand, I think hugely underestimated, but it's not a Shiraz like Australia. It's not a big, ripe, rich wine that's like you'd get from the Barossa Valley or McLaren Vale. It's a much more mid-weight wine with more sort of tertiary flavours. So let's see what we make of it. Anyway, let's have a look at the aromas. And gosh, if I'm talking about tertiary, that certainly shows that. I mean, there's an underlying fruit that is somewhere between on the red to black spectrum. Originally, I was going to sort of say mulberry. There is a sort of a mulberry, raspberry, that more red fruit note at the very beginning, but it opens out and it's much more a juicy boysenberry, more sort of black fruited note. But that is layered over with, there are various things. There's an earthy, almost heading towards the mousy note, but it doesn't overtake it and mar it, but there's that sort of earthy note. Maybe a little hint of bacon fat, and behind it all, a note of pepper, which is often a key for Syrah. So let's taste. It's a mid-weight wine. It's got a lovely warmth and richness to the fruit. And you've got this juicy, again, starting off slightly red raspberry fruit, but heading very rapidly towards a sort of richer, darker boysenberry note. But there's a real sort of savoury and slightly drying note to it, which makes me think that some of those earthy notes that I was getting, possibly a tiny amount of Brettanomyces. Again, Brettanomyces can be a wine fault, but it's not marring this wine. It's just giving it a savoury note and an earthy note. The wine's a midweight, and there is a fairly grainy tannic structure, but it's got a nice ripeness to it. It's not particularly drying, although at the finish you're getting a sort of a spicy, peppery note and the drying note. So just there you've got a little bit of astringency, but not a huge amount. But it will give the wine a little bit of bite. But you've also got a slightly lifted perfume, almost like sort of peony or something like that, something slightly floral. But there is a lovely depth and roundness to the fruit because that's still there. The acidity doesn't seem to be particularly high. I mean, it's not a wine that I would describe as mouth-watering, and yet there is a freshness and a juiciness to the red fruit, the red to black fruit at the end, that I can sort of taste on the edges of my tongue. So I suspect the acidity is higher than I'm giving it credit for. And possibly because the alcohol at only 13% is balanced, it's allowing that juicy fruit to show through onto the finish where there are those perfumes as well. So I think a really nice example of a New Zealand Syrah. And its style is probably more towards a New World Syrah, but also has some of that juicy red to black fruit that you'd associate with Shiraz from Australia. So a little bit of a New World twist to something that tastes more Old World in general. So Trinity Hill Gimblett Gravels Syrah 2020. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it interesting. Bye now.